Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Today we're talking about Season 4, Episode 21, The Muse. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is absolutely correct. And as I say every single week, and I'll probably say every single week until we are done or dead, you should find us and join us and follow us along. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or anything like that that you want to dive in with us, you certainly can. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to interact with you. And just enjoy because we're a good time. We're pretty awesome. As David said, we are here to talk about The Muse, the 98th episode for us. That countdown to the infamous 100th right around the
99.
corner.
This is 98?
Is this
99.
it? That's
Well,
right. This is 99. This is 99.
I was going to say. Okay.
And it's a great, and that's right. I remember thinking about that. This is the 99th episode. So we'll have our 100th next week. This is a great episode to be our 100th because if you know anything about the episode that comes next, which I guess technically we'll be skipping, or not skipping, but will be our 101st episode. Wow, timelines. Anyway, there's a reason for it, and we kind of the show kind of pivots a bit. So I think it's a great time for this to be our 100th episode next week. So with that being said, we're going to have a great time with this 99th episode. It features some returns of some great characters and some, new aliens and so forth. And I'm just really excited to talk about it because she's back, folks. She's back.
Loxana,
Lover to death. Yes.
Yeah.
Loxana Troy, daughter of the fifth house, holder of the sacred chalice of Reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z. She is back, and she is causing Odo no end of stress. So we're going to get right into it. All right.
Let's do it.
But now, of course, before we do that, before we jump whole hog into the greatness that is Loxana Troy, David, how was your week?
Week's been okay. Work has been really dead lately, which is not good. Today I took a really low deal. The guy got a real bargain out of me because I was like, I need to sail, So just had to get something on the board because I hadn't got anything on the board in like 3 days. So anyway, that's been frustrating, but did give me a chance to finish reading book 4 of The Expanse. Cibola Burn. Weird name. I don't know if I even said that.
Is that how you? I was always pronouncing it Cibola.
Cibola. Maybe that's probably the proper pronunciation. I don't know how to say it. But anyway, finished that book this week because we're going to talk about it during our 100th episode next week, our After Dark episode.
Yes.
And I started rewatching season 4 of the show to compare. And there are a number of differences, so I'm looking forward to talking about it. I mean, the overall plot is the same, but when they make the jump from book to show, they make a number of changes to expand the story, but also try and condense some storylines down. I'm only 4 episodes in of the 10 episode season. I have seen it before, but now watching it a second time with having read the book, there are a lot of things I'm noticing on this second watch through. So I look forward to talking about that next week. Other than that, been reading more of the Oppenheimer book, American Prometheus, which is still very interesting. I really liked the movie, as I've said many times now. It's very interesting to read the book. I'll have finished it by next time we talk. Looking forward to talk about that. And I'll be starting the 3rd book in the Altered Carbon book series. I don't know if the author is intending to write any more in the series. I don't know if they would call it a trilogy. There's only 3 out so far. But this one was written, I think, in like late 2000s, so the aughts, as they say. So I think this one hasn't had a sequel to it in a while. I wasn't as big a fan of the second book as I was the first, just like I wasn't as big a fan of the second season as was the first season of the show, but the second season was also very different than the second book. But I think they're actually going to be introducing a lot more plot elements from the 3rd book into what was set the second season. So I'll be happy to talk about those hopefully next week as well as I start the 3rd book of that series. So, but yeah, how about you? What's new with you?
I'm continuing the workouts, of course. I'm really enjoying getting into and understanding more of the strongman stuff, which it's just so interesting to me because it's like I've always been a strong person. I've always lifted weights. I've always done all of these things. But this is the first time, like, I really feel like ever that I have focused so much on what I call true strength, right? Because a lot of the strongman lifts are all about, or the just the events, they're all, you have to use like your full body. There's a lot of things about balance and coordination that goes into it. You can't really just isolate one particular body part, like just working your legs or just working your upper body or so forth. It really is kind of an all over complete workout, which is great for people who, like me, always seem to feel like they don't have enough time to do everything, and just trying to figure out ways to squeeze more time into the day, and making sure you're getting a lot of things done. And so to know that I can go in and do like 4 event lifts, and that completely works me out, is great. And um it's a interesting way to feel tired, right? Like it's what I've always wanted, just to feel drained,
Right.
to be completely exhausted, like from head to toe. I'm exhausted. I'm not like where if I do just an upper body workout, yeah, my chest is sore, my arms are sore, whatever else, but I could still go. I can still move through my day. This really requires me to put a lot of focus, a lot of effort into doing things, and recovery is very important. So I'm really enjoying that. Plus my size, I'm 6'8", so doing a lot of these things, it was already going to be a little bit difficult. But again, I'm just going to go ahead and say I feel even bigger when I'm doing it, and I like that feeling. So I
Wow.
don't know how else to describe it other than that. It's just
Whoa.
great. Yeah, and it's just like people see you and they stare at you a little bit differently. And now, granted, I haven't had like a whole lot of time to have a massive body transformation, but I've definitely noticed some differences. And I've been doing this now. What is this? This is August, so 4 months, I think, give or take,
Yeah.
give or
Okay.
take, about 4 months. So now, granted, I wasn't doing the strongman stuff consecutively for the full 4 months. It's really been maybe a month and a half to 2 months that I've really been focusing on doing actual strongman lifts.
Right.
Much of what I was doing before that was more into, kind of retraining my body, and a lot of stretching, a lot of, just kind of getting back into the routine of doing things in order to push myself to that next step. So, but yeah, I've really been enjoying that. Having to be very careful because there are some times where, old injuries crop up and, try to take me out of things, but I, I've handled it.
Right.
Other than that, work is pretty stable. Kids started school, so we're now looking at, we're in the 3rd grade now, or she's in the 3rd grade. So to say we, she's in the 3rd grade now. Um, Ecstatic. She's just so excited. She's also very, very comfortable, much to, my dismay on some, well, not dismay, but just shock. Like, for example, on the very first day of school, she invited, some friends to come over. Didn't talk to me, didn't clear it, didn't let me know, didn't nothing. Just
Yeah.
first day of school was already, ready to have friends come back, which, we had to put a squash on, want to meet the
Oops.
parents first, want to, yeah, let make sure everybody knows where everybody is, because I don't want anybody banging on my door wondering where their kid's at or any of that stuff. We had to talk about safety and, how to, the proper way to do things,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. So interesting to have such a sharp, lesson to have to do on the first day, literally the first day of school.
Yeah.
But I took it also well, in the sense that I love the fact that my daughter was so comfortable and so, personable, that not only did she make friends quickly, but she was, all for them coming back and
Yeah.
being here with us, and so forth.
Right.
Just had to explain to her that, hey, there's a procedure, there's a way we
Right.
do this.
Yeah.
Parents want to meet parents before kids are going to people's houses. So and she knew my phone number, and she knew directly how to get home to tell everybody. So that was also a plus. But yeah, so we'll be doing play dates and stuff in the future. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
So, but
It
other than
remi-
that, it's been great.
yeah. It reminds me, my sister-in-law sent a little video out of my 5-year-old niece reading a book for the first time, one of those sound out the word books, but like
Hmm.
for herself with my sister-in-law's help, really for the first time, kind of doing that instead of being read a story going to bed, she was reading the story before bed. So she's of course a couple years younger than your daughter, but those
Hey,
milestones come quick, man.
I was gonna say, yeah, milestones are milestones. I mean, I can take this, and then it'll be a blink of an eye, a flash, as they say, and all of a sudden she'll be 17 and demanding to stay out late and drive the car and do all of those things. So I've got that to look forward to. Um, yeah, so we'll see. But anyway, um, we're not here to talk about all of that. We are here to talk, of course, about Deep Space Nine and the Muse. What is this? The 20th episode in the
21st.
season? 21st episode
Yep.
in the 4th season.
Of
So,
26. Only 5 more left.
all right.
Yeah.
And so let's get right to it. Did you want to give the recap for this episode, or did you want me to do it?
I can do it. All right. So this episode, guys, is broken down into effectively 2 separate storylines. So we'll talk about let's talk about Jake first, because he kind of starts off the episode, and his is a little bit shorter overall than Odo's part of the story. So Jake starts the episode off at the promenade, looking out over where people are coming onto the station from ships, and he's looking over people to try and come up with like stories for what he sees. Like, oh, there's a priest, so maybe he's a priest disguised. He's a thief disguised as a priest, so he can get over a thief, a theft on a Ferengi. So come up with storylines as he's watching people moving around. But he sees a beautiful woman come off the ship by herself, and she notices him, and she walks away, and he's obviously intrigued by her. And later, she comes up to him while he is writing one of his stories in one of the bars. I don't think it's Quark's, it's one of the others. And she introduces herself to him as someone who has known, for example, the creator, the architect of the station. She is someone who has known many creative people throughout her life, and she knows techniques to help draw out the creative workings of various important people who will have their names, left throughout history because of their accomplishments. And she tells Jake, I can do that for you. Come to my quarters. So Jake goes to his dad, or I shouldn't say goes to his dad. His dad comes to him and says, hey, I'm ready to go on our 3-day vacation that I've been planning, the one that you suggested we take. And Jake's like, actually, I want to stay here on the station and work on my story. Not telling his dad that he's met this strange woman who said, come to my place tonight. So basically tells his dad, go have fun with your girlfriend for 3 days. I'll just be here on the station. Jake goes, meets the woman in her quarters, and basically she starts massaging his temples and his back and his the back of his skull while talking about how she's basically massaging various parts of his brain to get his juices flowing, get his creative juices flowing. And she gives him paper and a pen, actual paper, and tells him to start writing. And he starts writing, and it's flowing, it's coming out of him. Well, as we watch, we can see that this woman is, what her actions are causing to happen is him to, yes, do his creative activities, but it's also causing him to give off some sort of energy that she is taking. And it's very pleasurable for her, obviously, to take this energy from Jake, and it starts causing him nosebleeds. And after 3 days of doing this, he collapses after he leaves her presence. He goes back to the promenade and collapses. Bashir takes him and says his capillaries, his prefrontal cortex is overstimulated. We're not sure why, but Cisco, who's returned, is like, well, let's give him a chance to recover. He overhears Jake say the name of the woman, and so he says, let me figure out who this woman is. Well, while Jake is left alone, this woman appears as a ball of light, materializes and knocks out the nurse that is watching over Jake, and then takes him into the tubes and continues to force him to write while taking energy from him, and basically brings him to the point of near death and collapse. Fortunately, Cisco finds them, confronts the woman, confirms that Jake is still alive, and when he tries shooting the woman with his phaser just to get her to basically stop, it has no effect on her. Before she disappears, she says, I've been surviving off of people like this my whole life for like hundreds of years. I go from one person to the next. I stimulate them to be very creative, but she basically kills them in the process. But he's unable to kill her in return. She turns into a ball of light and disappears off the station. So Jake is safe, but that's it. She just disappears. Okay, now the other part of the story, which is completely unrelated, and you maybe could consider as the A plot, Loxana Troy has come to the station for Odo's protection. She has recently gotten married and is pregnant with a son, but her husband, who is a Tavnian, his culture keeps male and female children separate from each other until the age of 16. In fact, they don't even mention the fact that there are alternate sexes until they're 16, which doesn't make any sense, but whatever. This means that the boy child that she is pregnant with, her husband wants to take from her once she gives birth to the boy, and Loxana refuses to let that happen, so she has run away to the station in hopes of avoiding her husband and hoping that Odo will protect her. Odo does try to protect her as best he can, as someone who cares for Loxana, but her husband does figure out where she is and comes to the station and demands to have the boy child given to him at birth. Odo, having done his research into Tavnian law, says that it turns out it's not the father of the child who gets possession, it's the husband of the mother who gets possession of the child. And so with that technicality, if the marriage is annulled and someone else, i.e. Odo, marries her instead, he would be the one who is considered the father of the child, and therefore Jayal, the husband who Loxana is currently married to, would have no right to demand the child. So Odo says, I will get her to marry me. Turns out that in Tavnian law, the marriage proposal is allowed to be objected to by people present at the wedding if they don't believe that the marriage is legitimate or that the husband-to-be is serious. And so Jayal confronts Odo at the wedding and says, I don't believe that you're serious. And Odo gives a very passionate story about why he is no longer alone, because we know that Loxana, the first time she met him, saw him at one of his worst moments because he has to turn back into a pile of goo, go into his bucket after about 16 hours. And so she saw him in that state during their first meeting. And so he tells that story basically and says that he cares for her. And so they are married. But of course, the intention is that they will annul the marriage after the baby has been born and Tavnian law has been appeased. That works. So the previous husband goes away, and later at the end of the episode, she comes to Odo saying she's going to go back to Beta Z. She no longer desires to be a burden on Odo, saying that she knows that he doesn't really love her, that he really loves Kira, because they talked about it earlier in the episode. And so she says, I'm going to go and have my child somewhere else. And as a side note, as I'm sure Perry will be mentioning and talking about more, but this is the last time we see Loxana and Majel Barrett Roddenberry in Star Trek for the final time. This is her send-off. So.
Yes. I was going to talk about that it is the last time we see of her, but not the last that we hear of her. As we all know, Majel Barrett Roddenberry provided the voice of the computer on Star Trek, both Next Generation, or both, but all three, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. There's always talk of bringing her voice back to do something in the other series, of course. There's even, this kind of borders on a little bit of rumor and there's some proof of this, I should say. But we do know that there were several recordings that she made of her voice to be used for episodes, for the purpose of Star Trek. The rumor part of it is that before she died, she completed this whole phonetic lexicon so that they would be able to not just use samples of her voice, but also create new sentences and structures for her voice to continue to be used as needed in the remainder of Trek for perpetuity, right. Basically. This has not been done, though people have asked for it. There have been petitions to have it done. There have been petitions to have her voice being introduced to be the voice of like GPS stuff, like your TomTom or your Garmin or your whatever, that you use. Voices for your right. Voices for your Google Home Hub or for your Alexa or for your Siri device, whatever it is that you use. Everybody has tried. There start a petition to get her voice, to no avail yet. But I think it would be great if somehow this happened. Now, I do know that you can go online and you can download all of the stuff that has been used on screen of her voice to date.
Right.
You can download all those things and then program them yourself to be, your ringtone or to have them be the sounds from your computer and things like that. You just have to do it yourself. So, there's plenty of websites that you can go to and find that. And especially if you do any kind of searches for LCARS or System 47 is another one. Those two were mainly used with Trek, and you can get a lot of stuff for them, layouts and voices and all kinds of stuff, computer sounds in general. If you're interested, I know that they're out there. But yes, this is the last time that we see Lwaxana, and I have to admit, it's kind of sad. Like, as I've said before, and as we've talked about before when going through and talking about this character, she's one that certainly I feel like grows on you over time. Like, as a lifelong fan of Trek, I remember watching episodes with her in it when I was, 8, 9 years old, whatever, and I did not enjoy them at all. I thought she was loud. I thought she was overbearing. I just couldn't stand her. Anytime that she came onto the ship, I just was like, ugh. I didn't want to deal with it. Kind of like Picard does, whenever she would come on board, he would just kind of like hide himself away. I was like, I totally understood,
The classic moment of him doing Shakespeare.
Yes, when he's got to do Shakespeare to win her back. I was like, yeah, I'm sure that he really wishes he didn't have to do that.
Right.
But over time, she really does grow on you, mainly because to me, she is the embodiment of a person who fully embraces life in all of its forms. She is all about enjoying life, not to anybody's detriment or into any kind of weird or perverse way, but she's just all about like, she accepts you for how you are. She doesn't let anything really phase her or get in the way of her enjoying herself or her friends or her family. She's very vibrant, and I just always, like, as I got older, I really enjoyed that about her, because so many times when you see older people, it just seems like to a certain degree they're diminished somehow. They don't have not necessarily the wherewithal, or maybe just like the ability to really just kind of get out there and be fully, in the moment and going through and doing all kinds of this wild and crazy stuff and adventures and everything else. Well, Oksana never slows down. Like, as far as we can tell, she just never stops. Right. And I just have really come to appreciate that and enjoy that. And her philosophy overall being, find your contentment, find your joy in life, whatever it is, just, go for it. And, don't let anybody stand in your way of telling you can't have what you want, because you totally can. I really appreciate that about her. And sad that we won't get to see her anymore.
Yeah. I have to say, from my angle, it was like, this woman. I mean, I didn't know this was their last episode before I was looking at the Wikipedia page, which I, by the way, edited before we started this episode tonight, because they did not mention that the woman who was affecting Jake disappeared without being affected by the phaser beam. I felt like that was a little detail the Wikipedia page was missing, so I edited that real quick tonight. Anyway, I just the fact that this woman, I mean, I'm assuming that Majel Barrett is in her 60s by the time this episode is being filmed. And so the
Yes.
character, I don't know how old she is. I don't know how the Betazoids, how pregnancy works for
it's
them.
keeping with her. It's keeping with her age. So
Right.
Luoxana and Major are the same age.
Right.
But I understand what you're getting ready to say about the pregnancy.
Yeah, it just felt very
you know.
strange. We're like, how? I mean, this woman, like every episode, it feels like every episode we ever saw her on, she had just come from or was just in a new relationship. I mean, the woman was bouncing around quite a lot, frankly.
She was, but you know what? We actually get a little bit of an explanation of that in this episode, which despite how the longevity of the character, it's surprising to me that we only got this, really now.
Right.
And now, granted, there were sprinklings of this throughout Next Generation. We already knew that she had lost her husband,
Right.
Deanna's father.
Right.
We knew that she had lost a daughter before Deanna, Kestra.
Right.
And, but we learned here
on this episode. Yeah.
Yes. And we also know that we don't know exactly the specifics of it, but we know that she also suffered the tragic loss of her own parents, her own family. So it sounds like Luoxana's life has been full of loss. And maybe that really does explain why she is so adamant about embracing life and accepting yourself and moving on past things and not letting any one thing keep you down or keep her down for long, because she's had so much tremendous loss throughout her entire life. So, it would make sense that a person like that would be so, forward thinking, and her positivity is just almost overwhelming. Right. To a certain degree, but I think that it's just that may be why she does jump from relationship to relationship. She's looking for this kind of even though she says it in this episode, she's looking for this peace, this serenity, that she's never really had. She's aware of it, but she's never really had it, or at least not for long, because the people that seem to give that to her die tragically, so
I understand that for sure, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but I do feel like part of the problem I see with her is that she also commits herself to relationships that are bound to fail. Like the man she married in The Next Generation, who was supposed to kill himself if he failed at his task, or like at a certain age.
Oh no, their race, after they got to the age of, like, what was it, 60, 65, something like that?
Yeah,
60, I think it was.
Ritual suicide.
They're supposed to commit, they have a huge party and gathering, and then they commit suicide. That was Timothy.
Right.
His name was Timothy.
And so part of me feels like that's my problem with her, is that, like, how do you not know? I mean, she must have known that this was the thing for the children of this particular race, the Tavarians, that boys.
Well, she does. She does say that she knew that, but that JR had promised that it was not going to be that way with them.
True.
Now she did not know about Timothy and the whole ritual suicide until they were already kind of involved. And now here comes JR, and he was like, she knew about it, but he promised her that it was going to be different.
True.
But then after they got married and went to the ceremony, then
he changed,
flipped it. Right.
He started treating her differently, and okay,
fair
enough. Fair enough.
So, yeah.
I guess that's fair. Okay, I was going to complain, like, how do you not know about this? But you're right. She did say that, so I can't complain about that. I guess for me, though, it comes down to this situation is tragic. Again, yes, okay, it turns out the husband did agree not to do this, but the idea that the child would be taken from his mother, and so she's going to take him from his father instead, I just feel like I just don't feel like she really did a great job of coming up with a solution. I don't feel like she really went to this husband and say, look, you promised me, we're doing this differently. We're not going to just do everything the way, like, I don't know if maybe she did. Maybe she did off screen. I'm going to
defend her here, because I'm going to say that, she did not take the child away from JL. She was protecting him from being taken away from her. JL could have absolutely been like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I reconsider. Let's go home. We'll live together. We'll raise our kid together, like I promised in the beginning in the first place.
Right.
And if it was a societal thing, he could have left his planet and gone to Beta Z and
Right.
raised the kid with her, or they
Right.
could have found some other kind of middle ground. And even at the end, when he confronts her finally, he says, "When our son asks about me, speak of me favorably," and she's like, "Yes, of course." She
Right.
still wasn't going to badmouth the guy to the kid. He just needed to not want to take him from
Right.
her. That's
Yeah.
it. So yeah, there was nothing stopping him from being in the kid's life and being involved
True.
with her and whatever else, other than himself. He was stopping himself. She did
Right.
not do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I just have to say the whole idea that this culture would raise the boys separate from the girls, and they wouldn't even tell them about the opposite gender until they're 16. I'm like, how in the world are you going to get away with not revealing that important of information until 16? Like, I can see 8, like, until someone's 8, you get away with it. But at some
Yeah.
point, people are start asking questions, even as kids and teenagers, about, like, even history. Like, there's no history to be told where male and females are 2 different entities that have to be interacting as 2 different entities. Like, how does marriage
Well,
work? I don't know. It's
well, I mean, I would assume. I mean, we're making a lot of leaps and bounds, and inferences about the Tabnian society, but I would assume that they probably set it up in a way kind of like we do lessons in school. You don't teach 6th graders calculus. So anything that has to deal with women and how their species, propagates, or contributions of women in society, whatever else, they just save it until they reach the appropriate age,
like
and
they
then it's just
pick
like,
names of people doing certain things, but gender and sex isn't part of the description of the person until they're
yeah,
6.
or it's just not important. It's not
Maybe.
today. They don't, there's levels to it. You got to learn this part before you can, learn the next part. And whether or not we feel like that's the right way, I mean, that's just how they would do it. And it's
Right.
been,
I mean, again,
I
this is
mean,
another
yes, you could
example
say
of
it's successful.
yeah. This is another example of you got to give the show the benefit of the doubt. But when I
Yeah,
first heard it,
if you dig too deep, then you start to realize there's a lot of problems there. But so the lesson is don't dig too deep. Just watch it.
let it go, let it go.
You're supposed to be on the Waxana side. That's the whole point. They
Right.
want you to be on the Waxana side. So just take it from there. How could anybody take a child from their mother? That's what they want you to focus on.
Right.
And move on. I just find it interesting that yet again we hear of another Troy child, basically. Deanna, she had a sister that she didn't know. Now she's got a brother, presumably, that she didn't know. And we never hear mentioned ever again. In any of the rest of Trek. Never hear another mention of this kid ever. Right. So, I think that's just interesting. But whatever. Who knows? Maybe in a future far-flung TV whatever show that they do, there will pop up this half Betazoid, half Tabnian Troy child whose last name is inexplicably Troy, even though, I guess he takes the mother's name.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, I have to wonder if I guess the thing that comes up is like, is there a physiological reason that these Tabnians would have the separation? Maybe there is some again physiological.
True. I mean, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. Maybe there is. Maybe there's a something happens to them if they don't have this prolonged separation.
Yeah, I mean, when her husband comes and shows up, he basically denigrates women. I don't know exactly what he says, but he says like
he calls her his possession. Soft. Yeah,
well,
he calls her his
but
possession.
He also says, "I don't want my son growing up with a bunch of like weak women or something." I don't remember exactly what he says, but he doesn't make it sound like women growing up among women is a good thing. It's not like it's I'm sorry, but there's a reason for this that's purely logical. It's a sexist reason. Women are weak.
Yeah.
There's no reason beyond this typical stereotypical sexist argument. So yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is part of what I like enjoying about storytelling is digging deep into the why. Like, how do I make this work? How do I make this make sense? Like, part of the reason I like reading the Dune books is because I like the idea of thinking through the backstory. And part of the reason I enjoy reading the books written by by Brian Herbert, son of Frank Herbert, is because part of the reason I like reading him is because in part I disagree with his storytelling in terms of like, actually I don't agree that this character would have done that based on the original series. I don't think that's how the story makes sense.
And as an aside, I don't know how you do that. If I was reading something and I didn't like it and disagreed with it, I'd put it down right away.
To be fair, the stories are usually okay enough to read on their own. They're interesting enough. The plots the plots move, so it's not like they're boring. So the plots move along. But for example, just as a generalization, in the Dune series, the idea is the technology has been outlawed as evil, like spiritually evil. It's wrong on a moral level to have computers, especially thinking computers like that, like AI. In the prequel books that were written, that's because they're basically Skynet. Skynet came into existence and oppressed humanity for thousands of years, and therefore it was evil, and we had to defeat it in this big war, and it's very action packed. But I don't think that's how Frank Herbert meant it in the original Dune. I think it was a moral lesson. Like we're gonna, I think, find out with like AI today with Chat GPT and stuff. Is like people are gonna start abusing it for doing nefarious things like faking, news and relying on it too heavily that they can't perform like math on their own. They can't trust the news because it's always been faked. Like there are moral issues with technology that in the storyline of Dune makes sense. And I'm just using it as an example. I like reading the books and being like, you know what, I would have done it differently. This is how I would have done it. And that's what I'm talking about with this episode here. Like I'm trying to think through the implications of this society, especially with you, which is great because you're able to remind me that, wait a minute, yes, actually he did say that he wouldn't raise the child that way to Lwaxana, and he backtracked on his word, etc. So yeah, that's actually part of the fun is working out the kinks. And I feel like this society,
but even the writers on this episode would, they all were like, this wasn't exactly our finest hour. This is the quintessential what I was always referring to as a filler episode.
It feels like
they're needing to get somewhere with they have back then, especially when we had a 24, 26 episode a season format, they have to make sure they're hitting that number every time. So they're going to throw in these ones that are kind of like, this started off as a partially good idea. We haven't quite worked it out yet, but we'll get there. We know we'll work it out. Right. And then they've got some other things they want to do. And again, haven't quite gotten it, but we know we'll work it out. And then they smash it together. And there's some great moments in there. Don't get me wrong. So, Renee's speech when he's talking about Lwaxana and what she means to him, fantastic scene. I loved Odo there in that scene. Odo rarely doesn't deliver. Rarely.
I know why he's your favorite character. Yeah.
Yes, but I'm just, it was great. But yeah, even with all of that, there's still like, this is almost could be broken up into three plots here. We've got the Jake story, we've got the Lwaxana story, and then we've also got a bit of the Odo development story here. We're finding out a little bit more about him. He's kind of come to terms with Kira being with Shakar. He is still kind of isolated, but he's loosening up a bit. He's getting there. We see him playing games with Lwaxana, and then of course him revealing how he's changed because of his association with her, which, I mean, we as the audience, we've seen, but now he's standing up there and he's admitting it to everybody, to his friends. He stands there and tells them, how she, even them, these people that he was so close to at one point, or as far as they're concerned, they're close. But he's saying, she didn't recoil from me. I was never afraid to show, or I was always afraid that if I showed someone how really different I truly am, that they would recoil from me. But I showed her, and she didn't. She wanted to see more. She's also very intuitive. She comes into his quarters and she sees the stuff that he's got around, and she knows instantly that it's for shape shifting, and asks him about it. Yeah. Right, not just decorative, not whatever. That's what he says. Most people think this is just some kind of weird decorations, but no, this is how he expresses himself, and she's in on it. She's totally down for it. That is what I love so much about her character. Like, she has an innate ability to look beyond whatever is immediately being presented. She has no problem accepting whatever that is that's going on, and she gets into it. They're playing games with his shape-shifting ability, and she's talking about how much fun she's having, and he's having fun. And it's like we get to see Odo when he lets his guard down. And it's the first time, and really, I can't think of another time that we really get to see him like this. Um, he just seems so fun, and I
Right.
love that for the both of them. I mean, I
Yeah.
just think
They're playing
those
hide and
things are
seek for
really
crying
great.
out loud. Yeah.
Right, like a childhood game has a
I
whole new meaning for
seriously. My two
these two
nieces
individuals.
love hide and seek. My goodness.
Oh yes.
Can't get enough of it.
So I mean, it's stuff like that I mean, like that she can inject, that character can inject into this world. And Deep Space Nine is definitely darker than Next Generation ever was. And even with the the sixth and seventh season of Next Generation, they tried. They were definitely getting there. But Deep Space Nine has always kind of been the home for these kind of darker, grittier, stories and stuff. But when she comes in, she really can just be fun and be different and makes them be different. And to me, it's again, it's sad that we won't get to see her anymore. I would have loved to see her interact more with like Kira and having that play off, because like here's this woman who's in love with Odo, but he's not into her, and then here's the woman that Odo is fascinated with, but doesn't give Odo the time of day. I would have loved to see those two actually have to like deal with each other on
Right.
some level, and maybe Loxana kind of cluing Kira in that she's missing out on this really great guy who's like right here, And I also would have loved to see her deal with Cisco more. We don't really get to see Cisco deal with um, older women, matronly women, I guess I should say. And we know he's a big family man. I would love to see that kind of dynamic between the two of them. I mean, I think it would be hard to work out. Maybe that's why they didn't do it.
Right.
Because he is such a, he's a very, strong character, But I still would like to see them make the attempt a little bit, and show how her relationship with Cisco would be so different from her relationship with Picard.
Right.
Right. And how she like pursued Picard, but maybe instead of pursuing Cisco, maybe she views him differently in some manner or whatever.
Right.
I don't know. Just a lot of things that I was always thinking about whenever I saw them, even around each other. But yeah, I would have liked to see that.
Right.
One thing I did want to talk about, because I thought it was really funny, just a quick scene when she is in Quark's bar and she is lamenting the betrayal and the love and everything else. And here we see Dax and Kira and Worf of all people. I was so surprised to see Worf sitting there at the table, because Worf did not like her. Like he's never liked her.
Right.
And yet it's like it's out of that. I feel like it was out of that sense of familiarity from the Enterprise through Deanna, so forth, that's why he's there. And she has just totally killed the mood. And I love Quark being like, I don't know if it's because she's Beta Z or what, but she's ruining the mood in here.
Yeah.
This great scene, and everybody is so depressed.
And Dax are trying to go to Camelot and the Hollow Suite, but now they're too depressed to go. And which is funny because Loxana isn't like so depressed that she can't like move. Like she goes with Odo, but the others are like in this mire of depression. It's
because we have to remember that Loxana is a particularly powerful and gifted telepath. Right. That is one thing that has been well established with her. She's not just any other Betazoid telepath. She is very high up there. And we also know from past experiences on Deep Space Nine, she has the ability to project her emotions. Now, the last time that she did this, of course, it was beyond her control. She was suffering from a physiological change, right? Because as she was aging, but still she has that ability. So whether she's doing it consciously or not, we know that she can. And so I would like to believe that maybe she didn't seem as depressed because she was projecting so much of that to anyone who was around her. So she literally was a dark cloud bringing it into the room,
right? Yeah.
And he said, Odo comes up and he's like, Roxana, do you want to go for a walk? And Worf's like, I do.
That's right.
So great.
Yeah.
But now we have to turn our attention, of course, to Jake Sisko, our young writer, who, we see a lot of callbacks here from some other things that we saw from like the episode The Visitor, which is a great great episode featuring young Jake and middle-aged Jake and old Jake, and just Ben the same all the way. But here we see there's two things. The first one was one that you have to really been watching both this episode and The Visitor very closely to pick up on them. This one is the book that Jake is reading when he is trying to get inspired. No.
Reading.
First,
okay.
When he's trying to get inspired, there's a book that he's reading, and it's the Horatio Hornblower series. He's reading that book in this episode, and we see him in Visitor. If you go back to the Visitor episode, older Jake Sisko is reading the same book. Okay. It's like on his desk or something like that. He closes it at one point right before Ben flashes into the living room. So there's that first callback, and then the other major callback, which is again, it's the major one, it's the big one. At the end, when Sisko puts down the book that Jake had been working on in this episode, we see the title, and it's Anselm, which, if you remember from The Visitor, is the book that Jake had finished and is the book that won him so much critical acclaim and awards and everything else. So in this episode, we see he has begun that story.
Right.
And we know that he's worried that he's never going to be able to finish it. But we know, because we've already seen, future past Jake, whatever, that he does finish this book. So makes me want to read it. And I will say that this book appears in Strange New Worlds as well. Someone is reading it in that. Wait.
That can't be right.
That's not right. What was it? No. It's something else from Deep Space Nine, and I can't tell you yet because I just now realized that it's from from like season 6 or something like that. So we haven't gotten there yet. So now
I was gonna say, because Deep Space Nine is way after Strange New Worlds.
Never mind. No,
unless there is a time travel storyline that we're gonna get to, and you're just trying to backtrack real quick.
no, I wish, but I feel like Anselm does pop up somewhere else in like another Trek series. I'll have to go back and review that, but I'm pretty sure that it does. And Jake Sisko pops up, or not, like the name Jake Sisko pops up. So yeah, but I'll get to that later. But I do want to talk about this part of the episode because I just feel like what an interesting way to show how Jake is changing and how the relationship between the Sisko men is changing. Right. So what were your first thoughts when you watched this particular part of the episode?
I mean, it's pretty clear that the woman that comes along is creepy. There's something wrong about her. Why is she going up to a presumably 18-year-old young man and saying, "Come to my quarters tonight"? It's like, oh boy.
Right. She latches onto him quick, man.
Yeah. I mean, she says that she noticed him pretty quick and his abilities pretty quick. So, but yeah, it's obvious there's something going on there. It's funny. My roommate was watching this episode with me. I'm gonna give him a hard time real quick because I felt like he's like you sometimes, where like, you don't like the Ferengi, or like you react strongly to characters you don't like, but you're not supposed to like them. And my roommate was strongly reacting to this woman. He didn't like her, and I was like, that's the whole point. The episode wasn't trying to hide the fact, he's making comments. She's a witch. Like, that's kind of the point.
Hey, I said the same thing when I first watched it. I was like, I don't like her at all. Yeah, she's trouble.
Yeah,
and what is up with Jake and attracting older women? Let's not forget, this is not the first time. Marta was what, 20 to Jake's 14, was
something
he at
like
the time?
That. 15,
15 years old. Yeah. So now we have Onaya, who is clearly thousands of years old.
Something. And she says that he was the youngest she ever came across. Yeah.
She had no problem going after that young blood. And I was just, Yeah. So Onaya is played expertly, of course, by Meg Foster, who has a very, long and storied history of playing these kind of villainous characters. She's done a lot of extensive sci-fi and fantasy work as well. It's the eyes. It's one of the things, if you research her at all, and you look up like what commentary has been ever made about her, it's her eyes. She has a very unique eye color that it's just so distinctive, and the way her eyes like light up when natural light hits them and things like that, it's quite distinctive and kind of unnerving, and that's why she ends up playing these kinds of characters.
Yeah, and
so
her eyebrows are very almost sharp.
Yeah,
they're very
So when you see her in this episode, that's not makeup; those aren't contacts.
Yeah, the woman who plays Lieutenant Rowe or Ensign Rowe or whatever you want to call her, who also was in Battlestar Galactica, that actress Michelle Forbes. She also has a very sharp, aggressive, kind of angular eyebrows too. Part of the reason why I find her attractive as well is like that's, I don't know, it's something about that very penetrating eyes. Yeah, but man, like she gets him alone, and there's something like you just want to tell like Jake, what the hell are you doing? Run!
Oh yeah. Yeah, as soon as she introduced herself to him, my first thought was, Jake, she's too old for you.
Yeah,
like you should be able to tell by the sound of her voice she's too old for you.
Well, and anyone who starts off by saying I like Cardassian architecture because it flows, like it's not how I would describe it myself. So
now, I also like Cardassian architecture. I enjoy the melding of Cardassian with Bajoran architecture, because the Cardassian architecture, it's so angular and then dark, and then they use a lot of these different palettes that are so bright for the rest of what they've got going on. I find the juxtaposition of the two very entertaining. Intriguing is another one. Yeah, but like I would love to have some things that are lit up in that kind of style.
Right. I guess what I would say about this episode for me, like other than everything that happens to him, is I feel a little bad for Jake because I feel like he's still a boy. As a quick side note, in the American Prometheus book about Oppenheimer, it talks about his going off to college and having a prolonged adolescence is how the book describes it. Like he has a lot of maturing he has to do as a young adult. He has kind of some mental breakdowns in his early 20s. But by the time he finally graduates and goes to graduate school and graduates from that and becomes a professor in his own right, he actually becomes a very charismatic individual, kind of a womanizer. At least women like him a lot, whereas before he was awkward around women. So I feel like Jake's in a similar spot after reading that book. Like Jake is in this spot where he's not having emotional breakdowns. I'm not saying that was the case, but he is in this weird spot where he's, Nog has moved on because he's, gone off to the Federation school. And Jake does want to go to the school on Earth. I think it's in Australia, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And so, but part of me just wants something more for Jake at this point. I feel like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the idea of being a writer sounds great. Like, I think, like you, both of us, if we could like have a dream job, writer would be on the list.
100%, hands down. If I could make my living and be comfortable and whatever else, and be able to just write books, absolutely.
Right. And we do know, because of that episode, The Visitor, that at least in one timeline, he does become a successful author, and so we can presume that he will in this timeline as well. But for me, I just feel a little bad for Jake as a character, because I feel like he's still in a limbo state of, is he going to be a good writer? Is that what he was going to commit to doing? Is he going to commit to doing it by going to school or not? I think it's the woman here who says, like, you don't even need to do that. You have it all in you anyway. That's basically why she attaches herself to him and becomes a parasite on him, is he has all the creative energy she needs to like suck him dry. But I just feel bad for the character because he's alone. Nog is gone. He abandons his father. I feel really bad for Sisko there. It's like he's the one who suggested going on this trip with what's Sisko's girlfriend's name?
Cassidy,
Kristen, right? Cassidy. I knew it was a K. But Jake suddenly pulls out, and Sisko, being the good, loving father that he is, like he kisses his son on the cheek and says, "All right, well, I'll see ya." Gives him a big hug, and he doesn't hold it against him, But I just feel like I mean, if Jake is going to be successful as a writer, this is what he's doing. He's really committing to it, so I don't want to hold it against him. But on the other hand, I feel like you're alone. The only women who are interested in you are the ones who want to suck you dry for all your creative juices. You're not, spending time with your father when he specifically wanted to do so and took time off to do that for something that you asked to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, to be fair, this is storytelling, and characters need to be able to make decisions that they might regret. So, I mean, that's always my hardest thing, coming back to like, here's how I would work out storytelling. My problem with storytelling is I don't want to let my characters experience a tragedy. I don't want them to have a bad time. I know you're the opposite. You want them to have. You want to throw them into the deep end.
I want them to be worthy of the redemption that comes at the end. I want to feel like they really, truly hit rock bottom and clawed their way out of it. I don't.
You and I really should write something just for fun, because you'll get the character to the dark place they need to be, and I'll work so hard to get them out of it.
Anyway. I'd be for a little collaboration, but yeah, I mean, because that's what I enjoy the most, is when the characters just, they're trying their hardest, but man, they just keep going down. And I think that's why I enjoy The Expanse so much, because Holden and company, they try so hard, but they make stupid mistakes repeatedly,
right?
And then things are just at their absolute worst, and I'm just like, okay, I'm here for this. And then I love seeing them slowly work their way out, and they don't work themselves all the way out to a total positive good, not entirely. Right. It's like they're still just shy. There's still something that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth that's not quite resolved. There's something, and I enjoy that a lot about these. And I think that's definitely what I would do.
Right. Yeah. What I'm getting at is I wanted Jake to go off with his dad, but it was like, well, I mean, they did have to have a whole scene of them, filming on a different location, and that would cost money. So this was like a cost-saving measure. But then Cisco does come back at the end, so it's like a good thing he's not gone forever, because he's just kind of like our main character. And then I was just like, I don't know. I want Jake to have more than he currently has, and if that means he's a successful writer, he's got to commit to that, and that could be a lonely commitment. So maybe that's the commitment he's making, and that's what we'll have to see happen as we go along. But the more kind of humdrum lifestyle of having friends and going off and doing things and living a normal life, he's not doing that, and so part of me is sad that he's not doing that. But again, if he's not doing all that for his career as a writer, and we really want him to be successful, and that's a big ask. I mean, at least in terms of like realistic expectations, that's going to be a real big ask that he be successful, and so we're hoping for him.
So I think what you're kind of getting around is the issue here is that this was Trek's attempt at showing kids growing up, and this is not something that Star Trek has ever really been successful with. Star Trek doesn't handle children well. They never have. It's kind of odd to me that their biggest success with children is in just how bad they get them. Like even
turns out that Captain Picard was right. Kids are awkward.
Essentially, yes. And what we've witnessed here, is I think this was their attempt at showing how the teenagers get all angsty and into what their own world is, and they don't have this wherewithal to kind of poke their head up and really look around and see what's going on around them. They become so absorbed in their own world, their own stuff. And I think that's what they were trying to do here. And they added another element to that with Onaya and her kind of the way she's manipulating Jake. And I think that would have been interesting too to have added in there that, if we had seen Jake as an otherwise very personable and sociable kid, we know that he can make friends, and we know that he can obviously get dates and stuff like that. But we never really see Jake just kind of palling around with several people at once. He's not a part of any group or on a team or anything like that. He's very much kind of this, it's just him and Nog, or it was just him and Marta, or it was just him and I forget what the other girl's name was that he went on the half date with, whatever. Right. So he's been very, singular to a certain degree.
Right.
So if this had been, the reason that he was staying on the station was not just to stay locked away in the quarters and write, but also because there was a group of friends who were going to be on the holodeck with the new holo program, and he was going to be there and doing that with them instead of going through the Bajoran outback with his dad and his dad's girlfriend. He was instead staying to hang with his own friends like that. I think that would have added a level of authenticity to the whole, why is this guy who we just watched 2 episodes ago falling apart because his dad was, transitioning through time or whatever, now it seems like he just can't be bothered to spend time with his father. This kid who was so interested in his dad's happiness that he found a captain for his dad to date, and now he can't be bothered to, go on those things don't track unless there's some other element. And it's unfortunate the element they chose was just Onaya, her being the sole focus. If it had been more than that, and then seeing him even drop away from them, withdrawing from the friends to spend more time with Onaya, that would have made it a more compelling story, but also would have heightened the fact that there's something off about this woman, that she is doing something to him.
Right, so, that she can manipulate him in that way.
Yeah.
As you were talking, it made me realize, I think, what it is I have a little bit of issue of. And I'm sad for Jake that it feels like his time on Deep Space Nine left him isolated, and that this is just more of that. Because he only had really one friend, Nog. As you said, he had girlfriends, but nothing really ever worked out. His one friend is gone, and so he's isolated on the station, and so he isolates himself from his father in this episode, and he does so in pursuit of a long shot dream, which again, I hope he's successful. We know he will be successful, at least in alternate timeline. But even that in that timeline, he's even lonely there. He ends up,
he's all by himself at the end. He's divorced.
Right.
There's no kids in the house, and he's living in the backwater bayou of Louisiana, which his house apparently seems to be very inaccessible. The girl comes traipsing through in the middle of the night in the rain and whatever else to find him.
Right.
And he's ready to die. He's
dying. He's literally dying. And was it that he had took a fatal dose of something before she showed up, or that?
Right before she showed up, he had injected himself with medicine that was going to kill him slowly. Right. So that right when he died, he'd be dying when his dad was back. He had just enough time to see him, explain what was going on, and then die.
Right. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. Is I want Jake to be successful at the writing career, but I'm sad that he is a lonely figure, and that on some level he seems to have chosen that, and it's just sad. And I wish good things for him, and I feel like that might, as we just said, have negative consequences. But
mild spoiler, we see more of Jake in his development, and
we're only on season 4.
Right, the path that he takes, good. So don't worry. This is an episode that wasn't received too well by fans. It's not to say that it was deadpanned outright or anything like that, but it just wasn't. It didn't receive the same kind of reception that they were hoping for. Right. Even some of the directors and writers and developers of the episode also thought this was a little bit more of a lackluster performance here. They do again think that Majel and Odo or Renee, they do a great job together and so forth. But again, there's just a lot of things they just feel like they didn't quite hit.
Right.
I say all that to then, of course, ask you, but what did you think of this episode?
I did feel like it was a filler episode, as you started off by saying. I think that the Jake storyline, I don't know if we were to count the minutes, how much was devoted to Jake versus Odo's storyline, but it felt pretty equal. And
I was going to say, I feel like it's a pretty even split.
Yeah, and I feel like Jake's storyline in this episode didn't deserve as much time as it got. It's a fairly simple story. He's writing a book. A woman comes along who says she can help. Turns out she's nefarious. She almost kills him. He narrowly survives. Pretty straightforward storyline. The Odo Luxana storyline is more nuanced, and as I pointed out, I felt like there were some kinks trying to explain this alien society and how they work that we didn't quite get. Maybe if we had devoted more time there, we could have explained a few more things. Yeah. But as you pointed out, there were some things I forgot. So maybe I don't know. It's a filler episode. And according
Yeah.
to what I'm reading here on Wikipedia, people agree it's a filler episode. You can skip it,
Yeah.
and if you want,
But see,
I mean,
I would
right?
as much as I remember there being a time when I would always say I hate the filler episodes. I do remember
Right.
that. But
Right.
now, as streaming has changed everything, and the way we access shows has changed everything. I really just I'm the other shoe on the other foot guy, I guess, and I miss filler episodes.
Yeah.
Everything now is so dramatic and is so everything has to be impactful. Everything must mean something. Everything must
Plot must
move
be moving.
forward.
Yeah.
Right. And it doesn't give you time to really like sit and kind of be like, you know what? I really like that character. I really, I kind of enjoyed this message that we're getting or beginning to get here and there. And we get to come back to getting it piecemeal and stuff like that. If we don't get it all in that one shot or in the very next shot, then it's not happening. And another unfortunate consequence of these shortened, hyper, focused episodes is character death. A lot of characters die before you feel like you really got a chance to know them.
Right.
And it's because we get all this rapid fire development. Within 1 to 2 episodes, they've given us everything we need to know about the character, and then the third episode they're dead. Whereas in the other way that it used to be done, I mean, you would watch these characters for a couple of seasons. You might only see them, 3 or 4 times or whatever it is, and they might be a background or something. They're doing something quirky, and you're kind of like always glad to kind of see them like flitting around somewhere, and then something would happen. There'd be a major battle or whatever, and they get blown out of an airlock, and you're just shocked or whatever it is. You don't get that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a mistake. I think that we've lost a lot of things that make shows relatable and make multiple characters, besides you having to be like always for the captain or always for the first officer or whatever it is. So many things about different characters that you begin to like and just begin to kind of understand, and then they're gone.
Right.
Right. So, and I hate that for the actors, because I mean, they were characters like Miles O'Brien who were making their money on multiple projects and stuff while still maintaining this status as this background recurring character on Next Generation, and did this for years.
Yeah, he did. He was there for a long time, and then he got promoted finally.
Finally, and then he got a main spot. But we won't be seeing that ever again, I don't think. Because I mean, if they like you, or you become a little too popular, maybe you demand a little too much money or whatever it is, they can just axe you. Yeah. And it's before anybody's really had a chance to kind of be like, you know what, really liking that character,
Right.
So yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, I agree. Before we finish, I just want to say the one thing we haven't talked about is Quark at Odo's wedding. Didn't expect that. At least on I don't think you two would. I mean, it makes
sense.
Didn't
expect that either.
Characters in the show have to be at places for things to happen, but it was like,
yeah,
I wouldn't expect Odo to invite Quark of all people, but what do you know?
Yeah, not at all. And also another shout out to Jake wearing once again the 1970s public bus special, that purple and blue monstrosity. I don't even know how to describe that. I mean, Jesus, it was awful.
Well,
they just
Barack Lofton's cursive was very beautiful. That was him writing that cursive down, and it actually was on point for someone who uses.
And what was with that paper? Yeah, for someone who's never written on paper before. Yeah. Not only did he write well on it, he wrote cursive on it. It was shocked.
Beautiful.
It was like to think that they're still teaching cursive in the 24th century.
And it was a high quality paper. It was real thin, like see-through.
It was real thin. You could almost see through it. I was like, yeah, where'd they get that paper from?
And that pen was like a calligraphy pen, but it almost had like a pencil feel to it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And the way the sound the paper made when he was writing, I was like, where did they get that? Like someone went for the attention to detail on the paper pen setup. Is phenomenal for this episode. I definitely was. Like
again, as someone who actually still writes pen to paper, like I take notes in a notebook at work or like notes from church and stuff. Like I was like, man, I want that paper. I want that pen. I want that.
Yeah, you know what? I don't necessarily write that often, but every so I've got like legal pads stuff I keep for notations for work and whatever. And I am obsessed with finding like a great pen. Like I get in my mood sometimes, like, you know what? Really need a
I like
just
real
just
fine pens with the
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I do too. And I like the
Point
the
three, baby.
flowy ink.
0.02.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, you know what? I would write more too if I had that setup. It just looks like it looks like it feels nice. Yeah, it just looks like it. So yeah, their attention to detail on this particular aspect of the story was great.
Yeah.
Cisco, we also see Cisco sporting some out of uniform attire in this episode.
Yeah.
Hodgepodge of patterns himself,
Yeah.
So it had a distinct Africanized feel. I think they were doing that on purpose, but it didn't, like, none of it really seemed to like flow with any sense of uniformity that I could see. Now, granted, we don't see him in this much, so we didn't get the chance to really kind of like go full force on what he's wearing here. But yeah, he was in something different. But still, Jake always stands out because I swear it's like their intent is to make sure that he's in something that you're just like, what is that?
Right.
Like, what random 1970s abandoned in the desert Vegas bus did you go pull that off of?
Right.
And put on this poor child?
Right.
Everything he's wearing is always like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Well, so yeah, I think that'll actually, sum it up. We're a little over, but not too bad. Anything else really quick you want to say about this episode and our final appearance of Luoxana Troy, daughter of the fifth house, holder of the sacred chalice of Reeks, heir to the holy rings of Beta Z?
I think I said what I had to say, but I look forward to next week's After Dark episode, special After Dark episodes.
Yes. So really quick, we're going to give you a heads up on what that's going to be about. Obviously, as it is our 100th episode doing this podcast here, we will not be talking about the episode that comes after this one. Instead, what we're going to do is kind of do like a retrospective, a look back on things that we've talked about in our show during our 4-season so far run. I thought it'd be also interesting to take a look at the very first episode once again.
Oh man!
The very first episode of Deep Space Nine, and our very first episode talking about the show, and just kind of go through that little bit of a retrospective.
Do a rewatch. Oh man!
Yes, a rewatch and a re-listen. Rewatch the very first episode, and we'll do this ourselves, and then we'll bring it up. But re-listen to our very first episode. Talk about that. We will also be going full on into The Expanse and the fourth book here, Sibylla Burns, and the fourth season of The Expanse. This will be a bit of a longer episode, so just giving you guys a heads up there, because there's just going to be these two major segments that we're going to, go over. And if you want to join in on any of that, please, of course, feel free. I'm going to make sure that we send out ample things so that people are aware of what's going on, of course. So, yeah. Lots to cover in the 100th, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to look back. And I think that what we will also do, now that I just, because now we've had more time to sit with officially Captain Cisco, let's do a full-on comparison of Cisco and Picard.
Oh, come on. As if we haven't tried already doing some of that.
We've done it. We've done little bits here and there. We've definitely talked about different bits of their command style and personality and so forth. But what better time to do a true, let's compare than at this 100th demarcation.
Sounds good.
All right. So there you have it, guys. Tune in next week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of stuff to just really kind of talk about and go through and return to some old favorites and so forth. But yeah, you can find us, follow us anywhere that you do your social medias. We're on everything except for Twitter, of course, or X now it's called. You
I call it Twix for fun.
Yeah. You can also find us on YouTube, of course, where we have our live shows that you can, watch and actually follow along with us if you'd like to see our bright smiling faces. And of course, you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. But until next week in that infamous 100th episode, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.